Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. And I would love to welcome Denis CLIFFORD from Virto Commerce to the podcast. Welcome,
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Jason, and congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you so much. We were talking off air about the fact that we did have to reschedule this because you were having some construction work done, and it was just not going to be suitable to try to run a podcast recording whilst construction was going on. And I have the same, because next to us there's some construction going on, and man, there was a few weeks there where it was almost impossible to have any kind of conference call because it was just hammering and chiseling and drilling, and it sounded like freaking jackhammers over there is what it sounded
You can't function when that happens. Now, we were lucky it was just an afternoon, but even we wouldn't be having this conversation if that was going on, I can assure you of that.
I love it. Listen, as the Chief Customer Officer over at Virto Commerce, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what Virto is, what it does, what the niche you fit in this industry, and how you came to be in the history. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about your background, how you came to be in this incredible world of e-commerce. If I look back across your background, you've got a varied background, certainly some strong digital chops, global e-business manager at Heineken. I mean, that you've got a pedigree that goes way back, but you haven't just done the e-commerce thing. You haven't just done the trading thing. You have an understanding of, I guess, not only the entrepreneurship side of things, the service, the credit side of things, the trading, I guess what I would consider the real hardcore operational elements of digital trade, full stop, what that looks like inside and out. But what was the attraction to e-commerce in the first place?
Good. First of all, you sound like my agent, Jason, in fairness. I hope my colleagues from Virto Commerce won't mind saying if I'm looking for another job, I'll get people to ask you whether I'm a good fit or not.
Love it.
I'm often jealous, Jason, of people who have a very clear career progression. I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. And in 10 years' time, I'm going to be the other thing. And my career to date, I'm not finished yet, has very much been in that sort of, we'll see how it goes and what's the next thing that comes up vibe to the whole thing. I'm not saying it was completely accidental, but most certainly it wasn't fully deliberate either. I don't want to wind back the tape too far because then we would be back into tapes and not CDs, let alone digital. But I suppose a lot of my career has been, as you say, about the trading, about interactions with customers, and across a huge wide variety of industries, pharma, banking, and all sorts of stuff from an outsourcing perspective. But I suppose more directly, my route into e-commerce really started when I joined, first of all, Beamish and Crawford in Cork, a small little brewery, which was acquired by Heineken International in 2008. And not too long after that, drinks is a fairly traditional business, Jason, and particularly when it comes to the trade bit. Not too long after joining Heineken, I found myself engaged in a project for the Irish market of Heineken to start interacting digitally with its customers. And Heineken as a business, like everybody knows the Heineken brand, the digital marketing is amazing, the brand marketing is amazing, the portfolio of products is all amazing. But actually, if you were to be honest and looked at how orders were taken, how sales happened, that was, dare I say it, unchanged for 30 years, maybe even more. Okay, there might be a laptop involved where previously you might have written things down in an order book, but the model was basically the same thing. Take the order and 2 days later, the beer comes off the truck. So I guess around 2015, I launched with my colleagues at Heineken Ireland an e-commerce portal, which was successful. That template, the global Heineken organization liked, and we did it on a global e-commerce platform, technology platform. And then we started trying to roll that out across the rest of the world. So I never thought, oh yeah, great, I'm going to go and do e-commerce now. I was just doing commerce through another means or another medium, if that makes sense to you, Jason. So yeah, accidental, on purpose, somewhere in between. But I've always been enjoying it, so I kept doing it.
I love that. And my career's been very similar. There's been some elements of intentionality to it, but even how I first came to be in this industry was a total stroke of good luck. I knew that the internet was going to change the world forever, because I'm old enough and mean enough to remember the bad old days before the internet even existed, and then the coming of age of the internet, and then the rise of this thing, which is the remote control of our lives. And I've seen every stage in between. That resonates with me. Your story resonates with me. But So I'm guessing that within the Heineken group, that this was not just, so this was this serving grocery, liquor stores, pubs, bars, like basically if they were a wholesale customer, they could buy through your trade portal.
Yeah, good question. It's worth explaining, I think, a little bit. And this is, I don't want to be too specific about drinks in the conversation. So drinks is not the only industry that operates in this way, but Heineken is in multiple countries around the world. And the route to market for the product from manufacturer to the drinker is not always the same in every market. So there are wholesalers, distributors, importers,
and
agents,
everything else.
Exactly. So you have this sort of potpourri, if you like, of business models that exists. And so depending on the operating company, or OpCo for short, that the solution was being deployed, it would be tweaked depending on the business model. And actually, this is where Virto Commerce and I started to first encountered each other. So Virto Commerce was in 2017 chosen by Heineken as one of two e-commerce technology platforms that will be used. And the reason Virto Commerce was chosen was because of its flexibility and adaptability to those different business models. So there was another e-commerce platform in use at the time, which will remain nameless, but we would refer to it as a monolith. It was ERP based with lots of bolt-ons, including e-commerce, and actually really unwieldy, wasn't flexible enough for the different markets, was quite costly to develop on. And that's where Virto Commerce came in. But yeah, rolling out e-commerce in situations where there was a direct relationship between Heineken and an outlet, usually a bar, restaurant. I focused almost exclusively on on-premise HoReCa, on-trade customers. And then also in markets where there wasn't that direct relationship between the brewery and the wholesaler, or between the brewery and the outlet, it went through some kind of distributor or wholesaler, etc. So various different models exist.
Wow. Yeah, and I think you rightly point out some of the unique challenges and the flip side of challenges, opportunity of the B2B world, in that the B2C and D2C world is so simplistic by now. Sure, there's probably more complexity around branding, there's more complexity around positioning, there's probably a little bit more complexity around marketing and digital chops and influencer marketing and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not trying to say that B2C and D2C doesn't have its complexities. They're just very different when you compare those complexities to B2B. And I would say that within the B2B world, just generally as an umbrella, operational complexity is far more intense, and technical complexity is far more intense within the B2B world. And that's exacerbated by the fact that there's 3 or 4 major digital commerce channels that are common in the B2B world that don't even exist in the B2C and D2C world. We've got the traditional portalized experience, which is self-service. Then you've got EDI for the biggest buyers, wholesalers, and distributors that they want to place their orders via EDI. They don't want to have to log into your portal and place an order for 1,000 cases of something or whatever it might be. And then we've also got punch out and e-procurement in addition to self-service e-commerce out of a standardized e-procurement system or a module that might be part of an ERP. And then, of course, you've still got the wholesale marketplace opportunity, just like you do in the retail world. You've also got the wholesale marketplace opportunity for supply chain as well. And because of that, and because you've got these multiple layers within B2B, you've got manufacturer, you've got wholesale distribution, and then maybe you have resale. Because of those multiple tiers and because of those multiple buying modalities, combined with all the traditional named account managed accounts where, okay, I'm going to send an email through to my account manager, Bob or Jane, because that's what I've always done. And I'm going to have a PO as a PDF that's attached to the email, and then they're going to punch it manually into the ERP system for fulfillment. We just have orders of magnitude more complexity in the B2B world to think about.
I totally agree with that. Where I think going back over time, one of the biggest differences was in the sort of user experience and the polish of that. I think if we wind the tape back far enough, business users of portals and marketplace like that probably didn't put as much value in the sort of beauty of the experience, if you like. It was a kind of a utility. Can I get what I want at the right price? Can I see the stock? All that kind of good stuff. And over time, because in the B2C world, where that really excels is in the experience, users have gone out, experience things as B2C buyers, and now, why doesn't my B2B portal work like that? And sometimes the difficulty is when you're selling an e-commerce platform to somebody, you can talk all you like about all the stuff you were saying, all the back-end complexities and how we're going to integrate, and we're API first, and we're headless and cloud and all this amazing stuff. Sometimes you need to still show them actually the experience could potentially be as good as it is on B2C. But I fully agree with what you're saying. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so tell me about the background of Virto itself. Obviously, you were exposed to it for the
Mm.
first time when you were at
Yep.
Heineken. But how did Virto even come to be? Because I like to say that Shopify and WooCommerce have largely won the B2C platform wars. If you're a startup today and you want total control and you like open source and you want to own everything in-house, you're probably going to go
Yeah.
WooCommerce. If you like multi-tenant SaaS and you don't want to hassle with infrastructure and you want to have a nice fat ecosystem of apps and system integrators, et cetera, you're probably going to go Shopify. And yes, there are some also RANs that are somewhat popular, perhaps regionally, but by and large, those two platforms have won the B2C and D2C war. Not so in
Yeah.
B2B. And sure, Shopify's gotten a little bit of religion lately around B2B and have poured boatloads of money into it and boatloads of marketing into it, but they're playing catch up, and I think they
Yeah.
admit that. In the B2B world, it's not like that. We probably have 30 reasonably bloody well-known global B2B e-commerce platforms there. Then we have on top of those 30 sort of monoliths that are what I call generalist B2B platforms that can serve any vertical,
Yep.
really. Then we have vertical specific B2B platforms that are designed specifically for the nuances of given
Yeah.
verticals. And there's just not a clear
Yeah.
winner yet. And I think that won't continue either. I think that within the next 5 years, we probably drop back to maybe 5 to maybe 6 major generic
Mhm.
winners, and then we'll still have some vertical specific winners to go along with that, where we have maybe a total of 10 to 15 winners, depending on the part of the world that you operate in and the vertical you
Yes.
operate in. And so when when Virto was looking at the market and they were saying, hey, okay, cool, maybe there's some B2B platforms out there, but they don't do things the way we think they should
Yeah.
be done. That way, and that's the reason we're going to build something. What were those reasons?
Yeah, a good question. I suppose it's important before I answer this, Jason, to explain. I very much take the business view on all of this and not the technology view on it. That's my background too. I want to be able to express things in terms that business leaders can understand, and because that's the background that I came from. And one of the challenges in trying to explain sometimes why a particular B2B e-commerce platform is so good is you're trying to think, look at all this fantastic stuff that's under the hood. Actually, how does it drive? And you're trying to explain more the driving experience than you are actually how the thing is constructed. So that's my sort of preamble and caveat and all the rest that goes with it. A couple of things about Virto Commerce that I think are important to say in relationship to this. I think, first of all, from a leadership perspective, the founders of the company and those people like myself in senior positions have all implemented e-commerce platforms or designed e-commerce platforms from the ground up. And actually, there's long length of service in the company. I'm only here 3 years, but it's not unusual for people at Virto Commerce to have been there right from the beginning. So the company's there about 11 or 12 years, founded by genuine e-commerce experts, both on the technical and the business side, to be fair. Our COO worked in Asia on huge marketplaces over there and then took that learning back in to Virto Commerce. Our CEO, who very much leads the innovation, the product side of it, has worked in the industry for years, and he was one of the chief architects around Optimizely before that became Optimizely. So the idea was to try and take the best of what the technology needed and what business needed and put it together into a package. And what that ended up looking like, and none of these terms are unusual in the market, Jason, to a certain degree. I'll come to the differences in a second. But something that's hyper adaptable, hyper modular, something that can flex and bend as the business flexes and bends and changes. Also, something that you can adapt without building technical debt. So technical debt for me, coming from the business side, means that when I want to go and upgrade the thing, I haven't got this huge long list of things that I have to kind of change and build and adapt and whatever. I should just be able to almost, dare I say it, push a button and the thing upgrades. What Virto Commerce has created is a platform as a service. So if you want to integrate out to another piece of software or another platform or whatever for a specific piece of how you do business online, you can bring that into the platform rather than hosting it outside of it and continue to take those updates kind of regularly. And I guess that the other major things are, like, as a business leader, you shouldn't need to worry if something happens in your business. You want to expand into 2 more markets, double your business, you want to create a marketplace and host other people's products on your site. You don't need to be ringing up the CIO saying, listen, I'm really worried that our platform's not going to handle this. Is it going to be okay? You just need to be able to drive on and just do it and know that's going to follow. And that's really one of the big premises around Virto Commerce. And the other one is around the cost of innovation. So sometimes at platforms, you have this kind of low cost of entry, and then you find yourself over time as you further adapt and build customizations and features, that the cost of that is actually going up. That should not be. In Virto Commerce, we have got a low cost of innovation for new features as you move along. We have a community of developers all over the world. Our code and product is available to download for people to have a look at and even try building some of their own customizations before they go live. So we've got this development community around it as well, which is very successful. So that's just a bit of a flavor for, I guess, kind of the background, the product, what it means and what we're about.
Makes sense. At the end of the day, I see on here, and to be fair, I've never worked directly with Virto before, so I have to go with what's on the tin, so to speak. But 2011, founded in 2011, 100 plus employees, 3 international offices, 20 technology and strategy partners. Do you guys consider yourself a SI-led business, or meaning that you have SI partners that actually do the implementation, or do you consider yourself a vendor-led platform where you guys not only provide the platform, but you also do all the implementation services, the system integration services, and the like?
Predominantly SI-led, Jason. However, having said all of that, I'm sitting on the fence. It's very comfortable. We'll always take on a few choice projects ourselves to do with our own professional services team. Not always, but from time to time. And the reasons behind that are, if something is new or particularly complex, or it's going to mean we have to do something with a product that we've not done before, we're sure it can handle it, but we would rather do that ourselves first. And then sometimes with those projects, we hand them over to SIs then to run it for the run and maintain sort of relationship.
BAU type of services.
Yeah, exactly. So we're working with a group purchasing organization in the United States, one of the largest in the market. And we're doing that project ourselves predominantly because the integration piece is going to be very complex. And we had to design new integration protocols that we hadn't done before. And we're also integrating with very significant product catalogs. So we're up on 5, 6, 7 million SKUs, which needs to run really quickly. So that's a good example of something that we wanted to do ourselves, prove that, make sure that all works exactly as it should. And they're the types of projects that in time we could work with an SI on.
Makes sense. And with all e-commerce platforms, typically they have to seed the market with some sort of implementations that they can key off of and use as training grounds for new SIs and onboarding opportunities and all those sorts of things. But it makes sense that most vendors, whether they want to or not, they always have to have some hand in certain implementations in certain markets, especially where it's greenfields and you want to penetrate maybe a new vertical or a new opportunity like you were talking about, which makes complete sense. Now, are you guys... I know you're a headless platform, but do you also offer your own hosted storefront as well? So I know you would connect to your own storefront via APIs anyway, but so somebody could build a full, let's say, a React custom storefront front end and connect to you via APIs, but you also have a hosted storefront if they just want to get up and running quickly with a hosted storefront, then boom.
Exactly. That's it. We want, insofar as we want the platform to be something that you can continue to use or that you can design whatever you want on, we also want you to be able to go quickly. And in any successful e-commerce implementation, in my humble opinion, it is about doing things very gradually on a stage basis, building on your success, learning quickly and adapting and so on. So the only way to really do that is to be able to provide something that works very quickly out of the box. And then over time, if you have particularly complex needs for your storefront, as we were talking about a minute ago from a B2C perspective, then you can always adapt and use something completely different. So yeah, spot on.
Okay, makes sense. And would you say that the bulk of Virto's customers, are they in Europe? Are they in North America? Are they in APAC? Like, where is your nexus where you guys feel like you've got a really strong foothold and a really strong...
I would say Europe and the US, Jason, to be honest, are the two areas where we focus on. That's where the majority of our people are based, where our various competence centers are. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like with working with Heineken, so we have, I think, 28 countries covered with the Virto Commerce solution for Heineken. So obviously Virto is then deployed in Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and so on. We do regard ourselves very much as a global player. We're not restricted by regions. The way our platforms are hosted enables us to do that, and we can service those. We can follow the sun. So we do have people in Asia Pacific, in Africa, Middle East, and so on. But predominantly both by volume and value of customers, US and Europe are where it's at for us right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to go where the customers are at the end of the day.
Got to go where it is, for sure. I totally agree with you.
One of the reasons why I moved to Mexico. Look, having access to the easy access
Yeah.
to the U.S. market was just a very happy bonus of being able to be here, and it's a very short flight, hop across the border into the United States to be able to meet with clients and go to conferences,
Very
etc. It's a much longer flight coming from New Zealand to the U.S. than it is flying from Puebla to Dallas,
absolutely.
for example.
And you're
That's for
experiencing
sure.
a hell of a lot better weather than I do as well. There's a bonus.
Yeah. I'm looking outside today, and it's a bright blue sky. It's about 26 or 27 degrees out there. So it's really Celsius, of course. I was well
Thank you.
trained in Celsius being based in New Zealand, that's for sure.
Fair play.
Look, one of the things that I'm seeing, and I'd love your take on this, that one of the evolutions that I'm seeing in the B2B world, and look, I've been deeply focused on this space ever since I started my consultancy just over 4 years ago now. I'm seeing a shift away, or at least a recognition that any new commerce solution in the B2B world has to work for the buyer just as much as it has to work for the seller. And by that, historically in the B2B world, when an e-commerce solution or a digital commerce solution was put into place, the key motivators were typically, okay, this is going to help us as the seller be able to be more efficient. It's going to be able to automate a whole lot of processes within the business. It's going to be able to allow us to gather better data. It's going to allow us to minimize the number of new field sales reps we're going to have and minimize the number of new customer service reps we need to hire and all these things, right? So the focus has typically been very much internal and very navel gazing in many respects, versus what are the things and how and where do we need to meet our customers. And I think there's a recognition that in that model and in that mindset, there's a certain cohort of customers that are never going to meet you where you are as the supplier. You need to meet them where they are as the
100%.
buyer. And by that, I mean, there's a certain cohort of customers. Now, yes, Forrester did release a report at the end of 2024 that showed that over 71% of B2B buyers in the United States now are digital natives, meaning they're millennials or Gen Z. And of course, those are tech savvy. They expect automation. They expect it to be easy to transact with you. But there's still a significant old school buyer mentality, or they're in a situation where they simply cannot use your automations no matter how good they are. Meaning, if I'm on a job site and I need to get some building materials because I've got this job and I realize, oh geez, we don't have enough timber, or we don't have enough bloody screws, or we don't have enough ground anchor, and I need to get on the horn to my local friendly building supplies distributor, and I need to place an order with them, and all I've got is my cell phone on top of me here, and I'm used to being able to flick a message to my account manager via WhatsApp and say, hey, John, hey, Jane, I need this plywood, I need these 4x2s, I need XYZ, I need this whole thing, and can you get it to me by 3 o'clock today? Cool. You tell me what you got in stock, and can you just get that order placed on my account? Because that's the tool that they've got handy to them in the moment. And used to doing business that way. Luckily, with multimodal AI, platforms like Motivate, and there's some other e-commerce platforms that also have this natively inside them, where they can parse these messages through these traditional, just pure communications channels, whether it be email, whether it be WhatsApp, whether it be Teams, whether it be Slack, whatever it is, and they can ingest those orders, whether they're in plain text, whether it's an attached PDF or a CSV or whatever it is, or they can ingest a quote request and then they can respond electronically, because we now have the tools with multimodal AI that almost any format that the data comes in, we can map that directly into our commerce system and bring automation to that process. And it means that Bob and Jane can spend more time knocking on more doors, landing more clients, landing and expanding more with existing clients, taking them to the ball games and to the pub and all those other things that we do on a Friday afternoon as an account manager, right? We have more time to do those things. And I don't know a salesperson alive that likes admin, but anywhere from 20 to 60% of a salesperson's job is admin by definition, outside of some sort of digital automation. And so I've coined 2025 as the year where B2Bs realize they need to meet customers where they are, regardless of that channel. Regardless of whether it's a legacy traditional channel or whether it's a new channel, but we have to be able to still bring automation to those channels so it doesn't kill our people, and so that we can scale. Are you seeing an increasing recognition of that on the supply side of B2B?
Yeah, for definite. Absolutely, for definite. I'm very interested in all the points that you made there, and they have all come up in conversation with existing customers and prospects for us and for our sales team over the last 3 to 6 months, definitely. Forgetting the technology part of it just for 1 second, I just want to land on that point that you said about meeting customers where they are. Whoever wins the experience wins the market. It's as simple as that.
I love that saying. I'm gonna put that as a quote in here because that's so good.
But it's entirely true. For B2B buyers, there is price sensitivity, stock availability, there is speed, there is everything. But actually, all of that together makes up the experience. And if you can provide the best experience in the round, then you're going to win the market. There's no doubt about that. And it's very important for large, maybe traditional organizations to understand that the products that they sell and they offer, unless there's some particular exclusive contracted, you can only buy this product from me thing, then there is a danger that somebody will provide all of the experience that the buyer is looking for and then just take in the product and ship it. And so we're talking very much in the abstract now, but that recognition hasn't always been there, but I think it is coming there because a few companies have gone out into the market. They're digital first companies and they've said, okay, we're going to provide like a really whiz bang portal. It's going to be way better than anything that the manufacturers are offering. And we'll just take those products from another location into a warehouse and off we jolly well go. So that's the first thing, definitely. I think whoever wins the experience wins the market. The second thing is there was always a sort of a growing pain between the modes of ordering that you described, things like WhatsApp, bringing your sales rep, and the best in technology. There was always a sort of a pothole in the road, if you like. And what we're seeing now is that AI is filling that pothole in and making things super smooth. We have something running. This is available right now. Going back to the building site analogy that you had. If you're running low on stock on a building site now, you can write your order on a piece of drywall or plasterboard or whatever that's called, depending on where your listeners are listening.
Jim,
okay, so
whatever.
It's plasterboard here, right? Write down what you need, X lengths of 2x4 and blah, blah, blah. Just write it down. Take a photograph of it and you can upload that into a Virto Commerce platform and it will parse the order and translate it. That wasn't really available before. So that it's greased the wheels of how we used to order versus how we'd like people to order without people having to change too much of actually how they do their business. So I think it's a really exciting time to be able to meet the customer where they are. We can actually do it now. It's been a phrase for a long time, but I think now more than ever we can do it. So yeah, 2025, I'm with you all the way on that. Let's brand it the year of that.
I love it. And to your point, we used to have old school OCR platforms that were okay, but without multimodal AI, they got more wrong than they got. You usually had to have a human at the end of it to validate and verify, as opposed to now with multimodal AI, when you map it into the commerce system, let's say it's an order or it's a quote request or it's an inventory request or whatever it is, because with APIs, we now can extend the site search capabilities into those headless environments, for lack of a better term, those traditional environments. And we can get an update automatically from the system of the state of completeness of that request or that order or whatever it is. And then all we have to do is, if we've got all the data we need to actually be able to process the order, then great, it can just sail through the system. Where there's a gap, then we can identify just that gap and we can surface that to an account manager or a customer service rep or whoever it is that's in charge of making sure that orders flow through the system successfully. And we only have them focus on the things that failed, not reviewing everything. Where you might as well just have a person keying something in where they have to review everything. And so I feel like we're now rapidly getting to a place where ROI on commerce, technology, and integration investments is almost guaranteed because it doesn't require the customer to change the way they interface with you to automatically leverage that commerce investment.
Precisely right. So a couple of things in all of that. Again, I agree with you on all of that. First of all, ROI on digital projects makes me nervous, inherently nervous, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it purely from a return on investment perspective in the short term, medium term, it could be sketchy. And so I think there are a few examples I've seen where digital projects have not taken off because the number wasn't there. But actually, when you start layering in the risk of disruption, the kind of market dynamics, the geopolitical pieces and all the rest of it, actually not doing it represents almost an existential risk. You've got to do it. You absolutely have to.
It's table stakes.
Totally agree with you. And the second thing is, and this I see a lot as well, particularly because the technology around AI in particular is accelerating at such a rate, there's a kind of a fear in traditional business. I don't understand it. What is it? Like, how do I implement it? What's it going to do for us and all the rest of it? And I was talking with some colleagues of mine at B2B Online, former colleagues of mine at B2B Online in Dusseldorf in December last. And the conclusion we came to, we did a piece on stage and had a nice kind of chat about it, was that the principles of good business, of user experience, of customer centricity, of meeting the customer where they are and all the rest of it, that's all still there. That hasn't gone away. Product knowledge, if you're an absolute expert on your industry, if you're a key account manager or whatever who has an encyclopedic knowledge of what your customer needs and where they need it, like that's not suddenly going to disappear. It's just going to enhance actually what's going on. I was talking to Scott Wagner from the National Association of Electrical Distributors about this recently, and he gave me a really good example of this. And he was talking about how for electrical distributors, you have people who work at the counter who are absolute experts on what customers need. And he was coming up with this point of view that says, actually, AI can just help them to service many more customers than they would have before, because actually some of the order entry piece is taken out of it. They can actually take their expertise and deliver even more of it. Yeah, I think the future is very positive around all of that. And it's important people realize that just because this is here doesn't mean that what was good about your business before is suddenly invalid. It doesn't mean that at all.
No, and I think to your point, even internal sales reps, customer service teams, etc., they hate living in an ERP. Like it's a crappy interface, right? So even if they continue to do manual things and manual processes for their customers on their behalf, being able to do it in a dedicated commerce system, being able to search the commerce system for products, being able to check the attributes of products in the commerce system, being able to check inventory, being able to check the customer specific pricing by customer masquerading, being able to place an order on their behalf through the commerce system, like that, all that stuff, being able to check the status of their credit account, the whole 9 yards. It is way easier for a sales rep or a CSR to do that in a commerce system that was designed for that versus an ERP, which is typically designed for the CFO or designed for the operational and fulfillment, for example. And so even in a scenario where you're not necessarily getting immediate initial uptake by customers of your digital solutions, man, just using and leveraging the right tool for the job for your internal teams just brings so much efficiency to the business and brings more accuracy and consistency to the business, because instead of having to know as a sales rep, okay, I know that on network drive B, I need to go and find this spreadsheet. I need to go find this MSDS. I need to go and find this exploded drawing, this spreadsheet. Instead of you having to know that through tribal and institutional knowledge, or having your customers' price list sitting as Excel spreadsheets on your desktop so that then you can pop it over to them as an attachment on an email. Well, no, we need to be able to expose this data organization-wide, at least internally, in a consistent way. And commerce systems, modern commerce systems like Virto and others, they're designed to do all of this. They're designed to be that central hub of unified information and product data.
For sure. And you're reminding me, actually, because we have on a few occasions tweaked the Virto Commerce front end for use by contact centers with customers because it just had all the data there. And like I started my working life working in contact centers, actually, and outsourcing contact centers as well, by the way. So you would end up having to learn for 6 months. You'd have one systems. ERP, and it's just buttons and dialog boxes everywhere, and it's a total mess. We have used it for sales reps in the field. Contact center agents are using Virto as a front end as well. And we also are very focused on employee experience as well as user experience. So if you're an e-commerce administrator or you're an e-commerce manager and you want to start running different campaigns and things like that, our back end is designed to be as user-friendly and as attractive as the front end is. And I think that's important for sure, Jason.
Yeah, and I think that's something that oftentimes ERPs aren't generally known as the most user-friendly of systems. Like that. They're certainly not designed to be user-friendly for CSRs or designed to be user-friendly for sales reps, for example. And most businesses do not really want random people poking around in their ERP anyway, and they really try to lock down the permissions, and sometimes you need greater permissions to go in and adjust price lists and things like that. And it can get messy really quick when you don't have your ERP reasonably locked down. When you start poking around into the recesses of ERPs, bad things usually start to happen. And especially in B2Bs where ERP is literally the beating heart of the business. Like it is the operational system of record for almost everything that happens in the company. Yeah, absolutely. I think having a bespoke, made to measure, so to speak, commerce layer that internal and external teams can use is very valuable in its own right. What do you see? Is there anything that you guys don't do today that you say, hey, we see a gap in the market and we plan to fill that in the next 6, 12, 18 months? Or is there anything your customers are asking for that you don't yet do that you say, we don't do it today, but give us 6 months and we will?
To be honest with you, Jason, that's a constant conversation with customers. So I don't think there's any one thing that I can say to you. One of the benefits, we would say, of working with Virto Commerce is we have deep connections with our customers on a business level. So we understand where the business is going, what's the direction of travel of the market, what are the threats, etc. So customers are often saying to us, we see this starting to happen. And rather than customers saying to us, I need to be able to do X, we're collaboratively saying, how are we going to solve that customer problem? So we usually try and take it from the customer's perspective. And with customers with whom we have that dialogue, we will often take those features into the core platform. So we make it available for that market, but other customers can also enjoy the benefits of that feature as well. I couldn't really say to you that kind of here are 2 things for definite I don't do today that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. But I know tomorrow for sure I'll have conversations with customers and say, this is what we think is going to happen. Let's talk about how we're going to solve that. And it's one of the things I really like about working here actually is because it is always about the customer. So I literally before we started recording, I had a call. We're preparing for a customer workshop and our CTO says, we're talking about the agenda for that workshop, and the chief technical officer, Oleg, who's a very smart guy. He's usually the smartest fella in the room and he's a hell of a lot smarter than I am. But he said the first thing on the agenda after the intros, he said, let's understand the business context. Let's think about that for a second. He's a CTO and he wants to know what the business context of that customer is before we ever go near talking about the features. So that's a joy for somebody like me who's not really a technology person. If I'm a kind of a customer and business person. So when that stuff starts to happen, I think that's terrific. And that is why when I'm saying to you, there isn't 1 or 2 things that I know for sure we'll do, because we're talking on that level, we're understanding what the product needs to do into the future.
Sure. Makes sense. And as I understand it, you got 2 different pricing, general pricing models about how you license the platform out. It can either be a GMV-based pricing model, which sometimes works for B2Bs, but oftentimes doesn't because their GMVs tend to be very high, but their margins tend to be very low. And then you also have an order-based pricing model, which starts at about $2 per order. So I'm guessing that for businesses that maybe have more of maybe a D2C bent, then maybe GMV might make more sense. Whereas if they've got a pure B2B bent, then per order pricing probably makes
absolutely
sense.
And then within that you can license additional pieces around marketplace, AI features, and even that writing on the wall, taking a picture of a piece, and all that other kind of stuff comes with it. But it's very difficult like to put a sort of standard prices out into the world. We're not alone in that being difficult because you need to understand that business context I spoke about a second ago to really know what the magnitude of lift is going to be to actually get that product out the door. But yeah, that's basically how that works. Jason, you got it.
Makes sense. And when we think about because it's a modular platform, it's a multi-tenant SaaS platform as well. So
very occasionally we will do something on-prem, depending on. So sometimes in banking, financial services, generally they tend to like things on-prem on their own servers, etc. I think that's beginning, if it hasn't already, started to break down as an assumption now. But the vast majority of our implementations, in fact, all of our implementations now are on our Virto Cloud platform. Yes.
So you're more of a PaaS.
We're a PaaS platform,
not a service, as opposed to as a not multi-tenant SaaS.
And we would
makes sense.
We'd be very keen to draw that distinction for sure, because a lot of customers come to us and we compete against SaaS platforms. We're very anxious to have that PaaS message out there in the market.
Sure, understood. And when we think about the different sort of components or modules of the platform that a customer could opt into, you've obviously got the commerce component. You've got multi-channel. You've also got a marketplace module component. Do you also have things like order management, PIM? Like, what are some of the other modules that apart from the marketplace and the core portal experience, what are some of the other features and functions that are common to the platform?
We were talking there earlier on about storefront, and the reason we have our own storefront is so that you can get up and running out of the box really quickly. The core platform has everything that you need in order to do that. As you scale, you may want to introduce a PIM if your product assortment and all the details that go with that exponentially grows and gets more and more complex. Or you may already have that in your business and you want Virto Commerce to look into that to take the data out of it. So part of it being modular means that we can make a decision as we're building it. Actually, where does the data sit? What does a customer need to see? And what's the easiest way to get that in and out? So sometimes we'll take data in. So we'll take enough product data in to be able to display that, or we'll integrate out to another system in order to do that. So that's the same for payment services, pretty much anything you can think of. You can run all of that through Virto Commerce pretty much out of the box, or we can link out to another platform if you've got something there. Like, you shouldn't have to throw everything out in an implementation. So if the stuff there that's working really well and there's other reasons for that platform to be doing what it does, we'll connect to that. So you don't have to go and throw it all into the platform in order for it to work.
Sure, makes sense to me. Yeah, obviously we want to minimize technical debt, but we also want to maximize ROI and existing investment. So sometimes it's a little bit of a delicate balancing act there when you're putting together a global solution.
For sure.
I have to face
and that's
I have to face that almost every single day.
That's the point at which I stopped talking about it, because I can, in my mind's ear, hear our chief technical officer saying, "Okay, whoa, stop that. That's not a topic you're qualified for." But they're very patient with me, Jason. In fairness, they let me make mistakes, which is good.
I love it. That's great. We also need, like, I consider myself oftentimes my role as a translator. So I'm really good at translating business requirements into technical solutions and vice versa, so that the business can actually understand this is how we're technically approaching this and why. This is the business need that we're going to meet with this specific solution. And this is how it's going to work. And this is how we're going to have to train you and onboard you and make sure that everybody's happy and put you through this process. And what do you guys see as, I know that AI it is still very much a buzzword. And yes, there are some very specific practical applications of AI in commerce today that are starting to prove their value, very tangible value, like those traditional channels being effectively digitalized. Like I see it as a super tangible, high ROI deployment of AI. What do you think, if you were to look out over the next, and again, because you focus on the business more probably than the technical, this maybe should have gone to a CTO, but like from your perspective, because I get, and I don't know if you get this, but maybe you do, I get a lot of B2Bs that come to me and say, "Hey, Jace, we see this AI thing. We'd love you to help us figure out how to get AI into our business. How can we leverage AI? How can we become better with AI?" And that's great, but I try to encourage my clients to take a crawl, walk, run approach first, in the sense that if they're not doing e-com at all, which many just aren't, they've never done e-commerce, maybe they've done a little bit of EDI, maybe they've done a little bit of e-procurement, but they've never done self-service e-commerce before. They've never had to do a project of that scale before. They really don't understand the level of disruption it's going to bring to the business during the build, the deployment, the training, the stabilization process, and then the onboarding process with clients. They're really not quite aware of just how disruptive that can be for their organization and how much change management is going to be involved in that process. And so they think to a degree AI is a little bit of a silver bullet there. And there's a whole lot of work you're still going to need to do to be able to bring this technology into the business. And then the second thing I often tell them is, look, every single vendor you're considering working with right now is breaking their back to figure out how to get their technologies. It's not like you're going to need to go and subscribe to AWS AI services and then figure out how to integrate those into your stack. Your existing vendors and your prospective vendors are already thinking about that. They're already worrying about how to get that into their core systems. And you probably don't need to worry about that too much, especially as part of a commerce deployment, because that's going to be provided by vendors. And so these are the kind of discussions I'm trying to simultaneously reduce their fear level, because oftentimes they're afraid that, especially with sales teams, they think AI is just going to wholesale replace them. And I'm a fan of telling them no, but it's going to give you superpowers, and it's going to take away a lot of your pain, and the crap you hate doing every day, it's going to take a lot of that away. And then all of a sudden I become the sales rep's best friend in the span of about 5 minutes. But what are some of the things you're hearing on a pretty consistent basis from your customers that you think, hey, maybe this is an unwarranted fear, or in some respects, maybe this is something you should be focusing on even more?
It's a good question. We see a few things coming up. I think one of the areas where I think it's going to be tremendously helpful is around solving data gaps, particularly around product assortment and things like that. I don't want to overgeneralize, but I guess we wouldn't be surprised if we were to sit down maybe offline over a couple of beers, maybe companies we've worked with or examples we've seen where actually customer data, product data, price data, inventory data, whatever, is littered with holes. It's almost moth-eaten in a sense. And sometimes that problem gets so large that the investment to solve it really isn't really going to be worthwhile. The difficulty is, as soon as you implement an e-commerce platform, an awful lot of that data suddenly becomes available to the customers. They realize, jeepers, this is not good. I think that's one. I think the administrative effort piece that you mentioned is absolutely one. And referring back to that electrical distributor example I was talking about, where you have expertise, I think that's there. The other area where I think it's going to be interesting as well, Jason, is around circular commerce, re-commerce, whatever word you want to use in relation to that. I think if you looked at any CEO's top 5 things that they're worried about on a macro level, if we were talking about this maybe 3 years ago, I think circular commerce would be 1 or 2. I think it's probably 5 or 6 now. So there are supply chain security concerns, inflationary pressures. I want to manufacture closer to customers because I'm worried about all that kind of stuff. But I do think in the next kind of year or so, that circular commerce piece is going to come back. And I think artificial intelligence has a huge role to play in all of that. Just a couple of examples. If you think about a manufacturer of a product who wants to encourage customers to return those products and prolong the relationship by returning it for recycle and maybe buying another one, we've taken the customer.
Or maybe
refurbishment, correct, absolutely. And what you're doing there is you're stretching out the customer journey beyond where it maybe would have been before. So I'm oversimplifying to make a point, but buy the product, use it, and throw it away. Now it's buy the product, use it, return it for refurbed, get it back, continue that relationship. So actually the investment of effort in dealing with customers is going to go up in that scenario. And I think artificial intelligence can really help that. And I saw some really interesting examples recently. So in the kind of sports and leisure sector, where, if you buy a bicycle, for example, from a bicycle store and you want to return it at some point, particularly if you buy for children and they grow and you need a bigger frame and all that kind of good stuff, AI tools can enable that return. You can offer a fair price to the consumer based on a photograph of the condition of it. AI tools can examine the spare parts that need to be ordered in order to make that resellable again, and can inform a local repair shop or whatever who can do that on your behalf. And all this stuff will just happen. So I think as we stretch out the customer journey and hopefully stretch out the length of the relationship between manufacturers and customers, I think AI can help you to do that without necessarily growing the effort, headcount, cost of service, and all the rest of it in the way that it would have done pre-technology like that. And the other thing I'll say in it briefly, Jason, is if we think about any of the major technological kind of advances, breakthroughs, all the ones that kind of spring to mind around smartphones, etc., it was always about solving an unmet need, something that nobody had solved before. And one of the things, I think, just a note of caution on AI tools, I think your example was very good about customers or people coming to you saying, how do I implement it? How do I implement it? Don't worry about implementing it. What problem are you trying to solve? And then let's find the tool to fix the thing. Even better, if you can find a problem that no one else has solved, now even game changer. And that's where those tools will sweep in behind it. So yeah, just a couple of thoughts on all of that from my perspective.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. And I think that, for example, I've seen some really cool stuff in the heavy duty sector with tractors, and most distributors nowadays that I see, first of all, they're not usually just a distributor. They're oftentimes a manufacturer of some parts of their product lines, maybe 10% or 20% of their catalog, then they maybe distribute 70%, and then maybe 10% of their revenue is maybe field services or installation or warranty service or whatever it is. So oftentimes distributors now, they fulfill multiple roles within the industry, right? Very rarely are they just bringing stuff in, warehousing it, and shipping it back out again. They're doing all sorts of other things. I think it's hard to be a standalone distributor today without some form of services layer to go along with the products that you sell. And I think that simple things like telemetry on a modern Caterpillar, for example, where it ET phones home after a certain number of hours. Okay, cool. These 53 things need to be replaced, or they need to be serviced, or we need a hydraulic fluid flush, or whatever it is. For example, those components can be automatic based on telemetry, and there are certain systems out there that are already doing this. Based on the telemetry feedback from the actual piece of equipment and from the ECU on the machine, it's ET phoning home, and then it's automatically placing an order with either the vendor or the distributor of all the components and all the parts and all the service layer. It's automatically sending it to either your chosen service partner or to you if you've got your own field sales force, or you've got your own, for example, your own mechanics, field mechanics that are part of whatever you do. Let's say you're heavy, I don't know, let's say you do earthworks or whatever it is. Maybe you got your own team that goes out and does those services. But instead of me having to now order all those components that are required for those regular services, well, now Caterpillar can send those to me automatically based on telemetry. And it's these types of things, I think, that where I coined a term way back in 2017 called stealth commerce. And I originally thought that stealth commerce would only apply to B2C and D2C. But now with AI, I'm beginning to think that it's probably going to be even more important in the B2B world. And I use the term stealth commerce to refer to any transaction where the customer doesn't traditionally think of it as a transaction, meaning that it's an automatic transaction that they don't have to individually authorize. They didn't go out and individually shop for this thing. It just happened, right? And you've given your pre-authorization for all those transactions, those future transactions, to just happen almost like a subscription or almost like an auto replenishment type of scenario where you've pre-authorized everything. That, I think, is going to become just absolutely table stakes in the B2B world moving forward. And we need commerce technology that can support that. Otherwise, it can't.
Fully agree with you. That's a very interesting perspective. And I like that term, stealth commerce, actually. It's a good way of representing that sort of almost hidden transaction, in a sense that you've kind of fire and forget it. We know we need it. I'm happy for you to do that. Just look after it. And that, after all, is the whole reason why AI is important. You can just let it do what it does, provided you know what you want it to do, which is the other side of the argument. But anyway.
No question. Listen, this has been a fabulous conversation. An hour's absolutely flown by. Now, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and a link to the Virto Commerce website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to get a hold of you and have a chat about all things B2B digital commerce, what's the best?
You can get a hold of us at virtocommerce.com, or feel free to make contact on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to hear from you.
Love it. Now, this is the point where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Denis Clifford from Virto Commerce, what is your?
I was unprepared for that now, Jason. You've caught me.
I love putting my guests on the spot. They got to come up with something on the fly.
Okay, so I've got something for you then, Jason. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would your ideal career be?
That's a great question. I think if I could snap my fingers and be doing something else and be able to actually make a living from it, I think it would probably be something along the lines of like travel vlogging, travel blogging, travel content. My wife and I do a tremendous amount of traveling. That was one of the motivations of New Zealand and moving to Mexico. There was lots of motivations, but as you may or may not, New Zealand was one of the most horrifically locked down nations in the world during COVID for 3 years. Borders closed, and we couldn't leave the country for over 3 years, and it was just horrific. And so my wife and I said, we're never going to put ourselves in that position again. We got to get the hell out of here. We love to travel. My wife's Asian, and so we're a multicultural household, and we like meeting new people from new places, new foods, new ways of thinking. We like to see new lenses on the world. We like to see the world through other people's lenses, and so we both just really get a massive kick out of travel. And so I think if we can make a living doing that, then I think we'd both.
That sounds fantastic, Jason. So good answer. I like it.
Thank you very much. Listen, I really appreciate your time. It was a joy to speak with you. You clearly know your stuff, and I wish you and Virto every success, and I can't wait to
Thanks a lot, Jason, for the chat.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.